It was a decision like any other, a judge, bound by the law, denying clemency to a black veteran whose plea for a second chance fell on deaf ears. The courtroom was tense, emotions ran high, but the gavel fell, and the veteran's fate seemed sealed. The judge believed he was upholding justice, unaware that this man's path and his own would cross again in a way no one could have predicted. Just weeks later, the unthinkable happened. A hostage crisis that would bring these two men face to face under extraordinary circumstances. In that critical moment, the veteran made a choice that would shock everyone. This is the incredible story of redemption, humanity, and a twist of fate that would leave even the most hardened hearts questioning what it truly means to forgive. Stay tuned to see how their lives changed forever. Marcus hadn't planned to be anywhere near the courthouse that day. He'd been trying to rebuild his life, piecing together odd jobs and keeping a low profile after the clemency denial. But as soon as he saw the flashing lights and panicked faces, something inside him shifted. He recognized the danger immediately. It was the kind of situation he'd been trained to handle during his years of service. He couldn't just walk away, not when lives were on the line. Inside, Judge Thompson sat quietly, trying to make sense of it all. The armed man, clearly in turmoil, was becoming more erratic by the moment. The judge, who had spent decades delivering verdicts and deciding others' fates, now found himself powerless. He couldn't help but think of the many lives that had passed through his courtroom, Marcus's among them. For the first time, he wondered if he'd misjudged. Marcus carefully assessed the situation from outside, his heart pounding but his mind steady. Through the window, he could see the hostages trembling, their faces pale with fear. The armed man's movements were unpredictable, his voice echoing through the building. Marcus had seen this before. Pain buried under anger, the kind of pain that could spiral out of control. He knew this man wasn't just looking to hurt people, he was trying to be heard. But how far would he go? Inside, Judge Thompson sat staring at the man, his thoughts racing. For years, he had prided himself on his ability to read people, to weigh facts and deliver what he believed was justice. But now, in the face of this raw desperation, he questioned everything. He thought of Marcus, his plea, and the decision he'd made without looking deeper. Was this how Marcus had felt, trapped, powerless, with no one to hear him? Meanwhile, Marcus moved closer, unseen, his training guiding him. He knew the risks. One wrong move, and everything could spiral into tragedy. But he also knew he had a chance, a slim one, to save these people, including the man who hadn't saved him. Marcus crept closer, each step deliberate, his mind replaying everything he'd been taught in the military about de-escalating chaos. But this was different. He wasn't armed, and there was no backup team waiting in the wings. It was just him against the unknown. As he reached the entrance, he caught snippets of the hostage-taker's frantic words. The man wasn't making demands for money or escape. He was shouting about betrayal, about being let down by a system that had promised to protect him. Marcus froze for a moment, his chest tightening. Those words felt eerily familiar. Inside, the hostages huddled together, their fear palpable. Judge Thompson's eyes darted toward the door, silently praying for some kind of miracle. He thought of his family, his life, and the weight of his decisions. The hostage-taker pointed his weapon toward the group, his voice rising. Every second felt like an eternity, the air thick with tension. Marcus, now at the door, knew he had to act. But how? Marcus pressed his back against the wall outside the entrance, taking a deep breath as he listened to the chaos inside. He was about to step in when he heard something that stopped him cold. The hostage-taker's voice cracked, and in the midst of his shouting, Marcus recognized a name. It was a name from his past, a name he hadn't heard in years. Marcus's heart sank as realization hit. The man inside wasn't just a stranger. It was a fellow veteran, someone he had served with during a brutal tour overseas. Suddenly, the situation felt even heavier. This wasn't just about stopping a dangerous situation. It was about saving someone who had once stood by his side. But could he reach him in time? Marcus's thoughts raced. What had pushed his old comrade to this breaking point? As he moved to step into the room, the man turned sharply, his weapon now aimed toward the judge, his hand trembling. Every second felt like a thread unraveling, pulling them all closer to the edge. Marcus stepped into the room, his hands raised, his voice calm but firm. "It's me," he said, locking eyes with the armed man. "It's Marcus. We served together, remember?" The room fell silent, the tension so thick it felt suffocating. The hostage-taker froze, his weapon still trained on Judge Thompson. His eyes darted between Marcus and the hostages, his mind clearly wrestling with the weight of the moment. "You don't understand, Marcus," the man said, his voice trembling. "They don't care about us. They just throw us away." Marcus took a cautious step forward, nodding slowly. "I do understand. I've been where you are. But this isn't the way. Let's talk about this. You don't have to do it alone." The man hesitated, his grip on the weapon loosening. For a moment, it seemed like he might surrender, but then his gaze hardened again. "No one listens," he muttered, lifting the gun. Before anyone could react, Marcus lunged, his instincts honed from years of training. He grabbed the weapon, and the two men struggled as the hostages screamed. A single gunshot rang out, echoing through the room. When the chaos settled, Marcus was on the ground, holding the weapon he'd wrestled away. The hostage-taker lay stunned, uninjured but subdued. Judge Thompson stared at Marcus, his expression a mix of shock and something else: gratitude. The police burst in, taking control of the situation. As the hostages were led to safety, Judge Thompson paused, turning to Marcus. "You saved my life," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. Marcus nodded but didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The twist came moments later when Marcus was quietly led away in handcuffs, his actions heroic, but his past still following him. Yet in that moment, something had changed. Judge Thompson watched him go, already knowing he had a decision to make, one that could rewrite both of their futures. In the days that followed, news of Marcus's bravery spread quickly. People called him a hero, but Marcus remained quiet, reflecting on what had happened. For him, stepping in wasn't about recognition. It was simply the right thing to do. Meanwhile, Judge Thompson couldn't shake the memory of Marcus's selflessness. He revisited the veteran's case, diving deeper into the man's history and struggles. The judge began to see what he had overlooked before. Marcus wasn't just a case file. He was a man who deserved another chance. A month later, Marcus stood before Judge Thompson again, but this time was different. The judge looked him in the eye, his voice steady yet kind. "I got it wrong before," he said. "Today, I'm making it right." With that, the charges against Marcus were lifted, giving him the second chance he had fought so hard for. As Marcus stepped out of the courthouse, free at last, he glanced back, knowing his life was finally his to rebuild.